And see, I know a lot of people are moving to other, sort of other things where they're moving to Laravel, because Laravel is a big framework with a lot of tools for PHP. So they're not moving to PHP because it's PHP. They're moving to an established solid framework like Laravel. People aren't moving to Java necessarily. You see them, they say, I'm moving to Spring Boot.
Yes.
Because Spring Boot is a great, framework on Java.
ColdFusion Alive, the podcast for the ColdFusion community. Discover practices, tools, techniques, tips and trends for modern ColdFusion development. Brought to you by TerraTech, the ColdFusion experts. Develop, secure, optimize. Here is your host, the founder of TerraTech, Michaela Light.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Gavin Pickin, and we're going to be talking about the third part of the State of the Union survey and all the insights about ColdFusion land and all the tools people use and trends going on. Welcome, Gavin.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, great to see you. And Gavin's joining us from beautiful, sunny California, as you can tell from his wonderful suntan. Originally, he's from New Zealand. That probably means you can't get a suntan, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I can. I just go more lobster red than anything else.
Yeah.
But, yeah. My brother's got a little more darker skin, but I'm just
lobster. There you go.
So
you're the lobster. Okay, well, that's good. And he's been doing ColdFusion for decades, and he is the software consultant on ColdFusion at Autis Solutions, and does all kinds of other technologies and talks at conferences, does all kinds of cool stuff. And he was the main driving force behind Content Box, which is a CMS written in ColdFusion.
Yep, did a lot of work with that, and I got to get back to it. Clients, leave me alone for a little bit so we can get some more Content Box love out there.
There you go. So we're in. Last time we got up to question 27. Now we're in the whole section around ColdFusion Community, which I know is important to a lot of listeners. Yep. So let's have a look at if anyone goes to user group meetings. I think, unfortunately, I'm just going to share the screen for those watching on video, but I will talk it through just like a baseball commentator. I'm not as good as Joe Rogan at that, but Gavin and I will try and explain what we're seeing. So, user groups used to be a really big thing for ColdFusion. They're still going. There's some user groups online, but most people, it seems, have just never go to a user group meeting. And they're probably going to tell me, well, it's because there isn't one near to me and I don't like doing it online, or I didn't know there were ones online.
And that's, I was going to say, if they don't know there's one online, that's one thing. If they don't like him, yeah. But today, we're recording this in late October. Today, Charlie Arehart just basically live streamed his 300th episode of the online ColdFusion Meetup. So 300 episodes. And I know that, he took over in 2007 and he's done probably 280 of them. There was, I always forget the name of the guy, but there's a history of it. But, he took over and he's got a lot of great things. I think there's 150 odd speakers have spoken over the 300 episodes. And that's really awesome to see. So there are stuff out there. There's a lot of user groups out there that are more online now. But yeah, it's still kind of crazy that 57%.
What online ones? What online ones do you know? I'll try and think of the ones I know.
Well, the main ones, because on the CFML News podcast that we host every week, we usually try and cover them. So Adobe does webinars and sort of user groups. I mean, this thing is, what's your definition of a user group? I think it's a group of ColdFusion users meeting and talking about stuff. So that way the Adobe webinars count. I think, there's the online CF Meetup. Then we've got the Mid-Michigan Meetup, which is, I think, run by Rick Mason. So he has that. He posts about it on Facebook and stuff, and they're on YouTube. And then Nolan Erks has a more generic user group, which is Sacramento Interactive. So SAC Interactive, and they have a lot of JavaScript stuff there too, but they meet online and they meet about once a month. And then the CF Hawaii. So John Barnett's over in Hawaii, who started up another online one recently. And then of course, Audis does the webinars. I don't know if you call them user groups or not, but like I said, I would count them as that because it's a group of users meeting, and we take input from other people.
Do you have
too.
user interaction? Because to me, that's the difference. Usually the online user groups allow people to ask questions either verbally or through chat.
Yeah, we definitely encourage it through the chat. So that's why I think we count it a user group. We're not just, we're not just talking at you. It's meant to be interactive.
Yes.
And so
see, that's where I distinguish the Adobe webinar, because as far as I know, they don't do Q&A on the chat.
Yeah. I think they try to sometimes, but
do they?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's I guess it's borderline, but yeah. So I think there's quite a few out there. And there's probably a couple others that I see less often. But those are the main ones that I see pretty regularly. The South Florida
one used to do some online stuff. I don't know if they're still going.
Yeah, there's a few like that around. And so there's some, and again, we always try to publish anything we find out about on the podcast. And if you have one that we haven't got, but Charlie on his website, carehart.org, he has a section on like user groups and podcasts and all these different resources. And you can see the list of all of them. And he tries to keep track of if they're still around or not. And so that site, I'll try and get a link for the show notes, but he has a list of like user groups, a list of podcasts, a list of meetups. And so I think that's a great place to go look. And if something's not on the list, add it. You can ask him to add it. And if something no longer exists, we can update it too. So, but he's kind of got like I think he calls it the 411, like information on the ColdFusion community, and it's pretty awesome.
Excellent. Yes, it's a great resource. Lots of cool stuff there. So other people go once a year or a few times a year. So, I understand.
And I think the main reason people would say no is because Adobe kind of like put a hold on user groups. They dropped all their funding and support for them a while ago. I tried to sign one up, start one up, but they never responded to emails. They changed their user group system. So I think the user groups that are more active right now aren't necessarily Adobe ones, but I know Mark Takarta is really, keen on getting them up and running. So I would ping Mark Takarta and say, hey, I want to start a ColdFusion user group. I've had issues in the past trying to get a hold of someone to help me. Can you help?
Yes.
And like a lot of them are giving the Adobe Connect links out. So the newest one, I think, is the one from India called, it's a CF Tech startup, and they're using the Adobe Connect. And they just started, Raymond Campbell did one last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. They've contacted all the speakers from all the conferences. And so I'll probably be giving one soon. I know Brad Wood's going to be doing one. So they're reaching out, trying to start that there. And it's in the Indian time zone. They're trying to get Indian time zone.
Well, and that overlaps Europe pretty well. I can't quite mentally calculate how different they are, but I want to say they're only 3 or 4 hours away.
I think it was a 9:30 Indian Standard Time was 9 a.m. Central Time here. So 9 a.m. Central here is like 8 p.m. Europe-ish time. So it's probably evening time for them. So I think that one's a good one to watch. And they're going to try and get more speakers, and they're trying to build things up in India, get more developers there using it, and that's great.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's look at the next question and survey is what CF related topics are you interested in learning this year? And let me share the screen for those watching on video. Top topic is what?
Containerization, which is good.
Wow, Docker containerization.
Yeah,
and that's really important, these days with command box and spinning up servers or doing things in the cloud. So
I think it's great for the language, because one of the biggest complaints that I hear from businesses that their CEOs and CIOs are complaining about, we don't want to support ColdFusion. Our DevOps guys don't know ColdFusion. We need to switch languages. And so if you can say, look, we've got this, Adobe supported image or a Audis Solutions supported image for Docker, you just need to contain it like Docker. You give them this Docker image, their DevOps know what to do. So I think now we've got that covered. I think it really helps. It really does help that language. They're seeing our show notes. Woohoo!
Ooh. Well, there's nothing secret in our show notes. It's just what you're going to see on the webpage. My mistake. I just wanted to write that down. I forget. Oh, I'm sharing my screen.
Yeah, no problem. But so I think that's like big for the language, really. I think it's a big plus because a lot of companies are trying to get, shafted out of ColdFusion hosting. ColdFusion hosting is one of those things that we've struggled with because of licensing, which Adobe has promised that they're going to offer some free tiers. for AWS and maybe other providers
They
too.
have. When did they promise this? At
That's
CF
at CF
Summit?
Yeah. So if you have a free tier AWS micro instance or whatever, then you can use ColdFusion for free on that.
Woo.
And so as you build and you scale to a bigger box, then you'll have to scale to a paid version of Adobe ColdFusion. But that means someone who's trying it can play with it and check it out. And if your business is small and you can run off that, great. And then as you scale and you become profitable, so you scale, then you can pay for it. And that's great, because I think that gets people into it. So the whole containerization and those type of things is good for the language.
It is good for it. And of course, the alternative is to just use Lucy, and then there is no question of licensing, confusion, and costs. So, and then you can spin it up on DigitalOcean and only pay a few bucks a month. And,
yeah, for sure. They actually have an app platform now, which I've experimented with, and it's done some work. But yeah, you can actually spin up a DigitalOcean app. Tell it how many instances you want, give it your code. And it's pretty neat. It's still lacking some stuff. It's similar to Lightsail, but it's come a long way. So that's their first iteration of it. I'm sure it's going to only get it better. So it'll be a great way to just drop something in and start.
And then other things folks are interested in VS Code for CF. Of course, there's a new Adobe extension for VS Code, and there's a whole bunch of existing other extensions for VS Code, and it's the most popular editor.
Yep, the Kamasama K one is the most popular one out there, but Adobe's CF Builder for VS Code it's got some pretty cool features, and so they're working on that. I think it's still officially not even released yet. It's still like in the beta, public beta,
extended beta, so you can download it for free and try it out.
Yeah, so and that's positive, and because I think VS Code is a great tool. A lot of people using it for other languages already, so make it available for ColdFusion. That's really good, and we're trying to up our other tools. Like Scott Steinbeck and I are working on some stuff for Testbox integration because they have a Testbox extension, but there's some stuff I want to add to it. Improve the snippets, improve the ability to run a test from a file quickly. Scott's doing stuff where he's you can run snippets of code to try CF from VS Code. So you select some code and click a button, and then it's going to spin up a VS Code window and run it. A try CF window, like all sorts of crazy stuff that we're trying to do. And just more tools like that will make CF developers' lives better. But it's not too many surprising things on that list, really. I mean, continuous integration. It's great to see that more people are wanting to see this more, use it more. Command box. I wonder if 36% of people aren't using it and they want to use it, or they just want to learn more about it, because there's so much it can do. It's really awesome. But serverless and API manager and there's a
lot of modern. I think the overall thing I would take away from this is there's a lot of modern techniques and tools that CFers want to learn. So
for sure,
this just shows how alive ColdFusion is. Because if this was COBOL, I don't think they would be doing all these modern. I don't know if you can even run COBOL in a container, for example. And maybe there is VS Code extensions for COBOL. I'm sure there are, but.
There's
and I'm not trying to pick on COBOL, but ColdFusion gets accused of being legacy and old-fashioned, and the truth is all these things that are out there are very modern. They're more modern than a lot of other .NET or other environments have. So
for sure. And it's good to see people looking at more testing, looking at service, object-oriented, security. I mean, these are all good things to learn about. So, and then see down on the bottom, databases and multi-cloud. So, I mean, because most people should know the database already, but there's some pretty cool advancements in databases. Like there's the Superbase and, all the modern database things. So that's cool. People are wanting to modernize and learn, and that's the way it should be.
Indeed. Well, next question is about the blogs people use. The number one blog this year is what?
Ben Adele.
And he writes about a lot of those things we just looked at on the last question. He was actually learning new things in MySQL. Every day he publishes an article. I don't know how he has time to do any work.
Because he gets up 2 hours early before everybody else is awake, and that's what he does. So he dedicates time every day to it, which is great. And every once in a while, he gets stuck on something because he's working on it, and then when he gets done, he publishes a bunch of content out. And it's great. But I like the fact that he's openly exploring his thoughts there, and it starts a conversation. Some people only plug basically they wait till they have a 10-page novel. And I know that's great for SEO to have a really big, detailed, in-depth article. But I like the fact that Ben spits something out so people can talk about it, discuss it like we do on the podcast. And then, it gets people interacting. And I think we need more of that in the community. Like, I want to get the smart people together and say, hey, I'm building a notifications network that wants to support multiple protocols for people and handle these weird rules. Like, I'm sure everyone's built one before. Let's put all our heads together, figure out what worked, what didn't work, and make a really awesome one. And then we can all use it, That's so Ben brings up these discussions. People, like, his comments are almost as valuable as the blog posts. So whenever you read his blogs, always read the comments because there's amazing stuff in it. So, but
that is true. And he is well worth getting, subscribing, or he republishes it on LinkedIn or Facebook, or I don't know if he does it on Twitter or not.
Yeah, he does. He does Twitter under the ColdFusion hashtag and sometimes the CFML hashtag.
Yeah. Other popular blogs out there, Charlie Earhart, of course, you mentioned earlier. He always has detailed blog entries on new releases and hidden gems he's found and any security issues. He's usually the second person in the internet to write about it, or third.
Yep.
So Pete Freitag is great for security stuff. He's really quick on the ball for security issues. We listed the ColdFusion community. That's actually multiple people. Probably,
that's actually a lot of people repost or repurpose or post new stuff there. But yeah, it's good to see people are going there to check out stuff. Obviously, Adobe posts their stuff there. If you want to see anything from Adobe, that's where you got to go. We're trying to republish it from there outside that, so we'll always watch it. And we have a couple of subscribers, RSS feed readers that I use to try and get the content in the podcast. And then I know Pete Freitag, or is it Freitag? I always say Freitag, probably is Freitag. And then he has the CF Break Mail newsletter that it talks about all the latest posts from everywhere. So that's always good to keep up on too. But then obviously you're up there, Brad's up there, the Auto Solution blog is up there, Fusion Reactor, Nolan Irk, Mark Kruger. I didn't know as many people who's writing on that, and Tony Junkies I haven't seen too much, but I didn't see Matthew Clemente on that list. He's got a pretty good blog.
Matthew we'll Clemente, have to add it in for next
year. Yeah, Michael Bourne. I had one that died because I didn't realize that my domain name was on an old email address and it expired, and someone picked it up and is trying to sell it back to me for $50,000. So I'm going to change my URL and I'll repost it. It's pretty old content, but I'm on orders most of the time anyway. So, but James Moberg has a blog. We should probably put him on the list too.
Yeah,
I'll have to go through the podcast list and give you a list of the ones we look at.
Yeah, please do. And there's also some blog aggregators out there. I think it's called, is it CF Feed, or I forget the name of it.
I don't know if it's still working.
CF News.
I think we
should. It was working a while ago.
Yeah, well, I need to find the aggregators, and then we need to aggregate the aggregators, because I really do think we need to have a good ColdFusion one that publishes everybody's stuff. Because
there's at least one, and there may be two that I'm aware of, and I'm sorry, I'm spacing on the exact URLs. But
no, I think if we don't have a good one, we should get it up and running again, because
the guy who did that new CMS for ColdFusion, I'm spacing on his name. Sorry.
Oh, you mean the Galaxy blog by Greg Alexander?
Yeah, I think he did a feed.
Well, he was asking about what blogs to add to it. So he may have one. I just don't know if he has everybody on it or not. But anyway, we got to get together as a community and put one together, because I think it'd be great just to have one place to go look for all the CFML blogs. So I think we should definitely look at that.
I'm pretty sure there's several out there. I've seen them. I'm sorry, I'm not pulling up their names, but
if you remember later, ping me, because that's something I actually wanted to get up and running, is more content like that.
Yep.
Part of the whole CFML Rocks thing that Audis is doing is trying to get more publicity and marketing for CFML in general, and that's one of the things we wanted to highlight, is every bit of content from every blogger, from every video, from every podcast that has anything to do with ColdFusion. So we really want to basically bring all that together and make it easy to find and easy to look at. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do in that. So
excellent.
So yeah,
be a mega feed.
Plan. Yep.
Now, we've talked about blogs. I think the next thing to look at is ColdFusion conferences. So top conference this year was what?
None.
None. None. Oh,
So
those
the
people
Adobe,
who don't go to conferences.
yeah. So
Well,
the Adobe
we listed
ColdFusion Developer
Adobe
Week.
Developer Week. Yeah, we listed online conferences because it's been a bit of a funny year for travel.
Yep. So that's not bad.
uh,
So almost 100 people there, and I know they had a lot of signups. They had a couple of thousand people sign up.
oh
So
yeah.
that shows how many people will take the survey. We got to get more people take the survey. So if you guys are watching this, and you don't take the survey, or you know people that didn't take it, please share it next year. We want more people submitting their questions and answers. So, but yeah, ColdFusion Developer Week. That's good to see. 98 Into the Box was pretty high again, and then ColdFusion Summit West and East. Now I know that the West one is the Vegas conference. Is the East the government one?
Yeah, the one they've had in Washington D.C., but I don't think
Okay.
they had it this year.
Yeah,
They did. They substituted Developer Week instead.
Okay, that's what I thought they'd done. So because they had an early developer week and they had a later developer week, and then CF Camp.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people they're hoping that CF Camp would be around to attend.
Yes. Well, we
Not
didn't
yet.
know when this survey was published back in January. People
Yep.
didn't know if it was going to happen or not. So
Yep,
maybe
and
this was like they wanted to go to it.
yeah, so that's good though. That's a good coverage. And Audit Developer Week, Adobe ColdFusion Summit India. So there's some people that want to go to that too. So
A lot of people. I did a post asking who would go to CF Summit India if it happened, and there were, I forget how many people answered that, but a lot.
very cool. So
and when it was last held in 2019, before the COVID stuff, I want to say there were at least 100 people there, maybe
That's
more,
great.
maybe 120. I forget. It was a good event, And of course, all the Adobe engineers are there in India. So, it's very rich for a technical thing and being able to talk to the folks directly. So, and it wasn't just Indians who went there. I went there, and there were several other people, Americans who went, who happened, I guess they were, I don't think they flew to India just to go to the conference. I think they were in the area and they said, well, heck, there's a ColdFusion conference. I'm going to attend.
It's a good excuse to go and visit, like I want to go see some cricket matches in India, being a cricket fan, and India is a cricket loving nation. So I want to definitely check that out. So,
there they are. Well, next time it happens. And then we've got some other events, Autist Developer Week, Max, which is happening. I think, is Max happening this week or next week? It's pretty soon.
I think it happened. I think it happened last week or
last week.
This week. Yeah, I know it started already. It's pretty big. And then Into the Box Latam is going to be later this year in December. Then in San Salvador, El Salvador, we got a big thing going on there. So last year we did it virtual because of COVID, but the year before, I believe, well, maybe the year before that, the first one we did there, the government got behind it, the universities got behind it. We had a bunch of new developers from Java and all these other languages, and they'd never heard of ColdFusion, so they had none of the stigma. There was no dead ColdFusion. They didn't know what it was. They saw it. They saw it was ECMAScript. It was like Java and JavaScript, but fast on the server, and they loved it. And so it's a really big market, and we've got a pretty big team down there in El Salvador now. We've got 25 employees down in El Salvador. A lot of them doing ColdFusion. We've got QA people, we've got designers, we've got a lot of different people working in our team, and we're trying to grow it. We're working on trying to get more youth learning out there too. So one of the orphanages,
maybe we can transplant the youth learning to ColdFusion into the United States. It'll be a reverse.
You didn't hear what Brian Seppi talked about in the keynote, because he talked all about some education stuff. So I'll have to say you should try and get Brian Seppi on a podcast soon, because he had a great talk about it. I spoke with him during the a couple of the breaks and whatever. He's doing some really cool stuff with education in North Carolina, working with the schools, getting junior high school kids and the teachers trained. And it's actually going pretty good, because the high schools and the colleges are already set in whatever languages they're doing. Yeah, but he's doing some cool stuff. I got a blog I'm writing about it to release, because Otis is going to talk to him, because we're doing stuff in El Salvador with the youth at the orphanages there to try and get the youth learning. And so we're taking the modern CFML book, and we're trying to make it more kid friendly. But Brian did some cool stuff with Raspberry Pis. They installed Adobe ColdFusion 2021 on it. They took the Raspberry Pis home, so now they can have a ColdFusion server at home. It's pretty cool. He did some great work. So but I think more of that is done.
I'll misquote Franklin Roosevelt or Herbert Hoover or whoever, whichever US president said a chicken in every home. You should have a ColdFusion server in every home.
Yeah, with Raspberry Pis and stuff, it's not hard. Like you can have the ones that have a keyboard built in with a Raspberry Pi in it. You just plug a monitor in and you're done. And yeah, so it's very cool.
It is cool. I actually have a computer science friend. He's a professor of computer science, and he goes to a country in Africa, and they give out Raspberry Pis and help kids learn programming to get out of the poverty that's there. It's really cool.
Yep.
So
so next on the list is online communities.
Yes, let's have a look at online communities.
So I was surprised that we had only 48% of the people that did the survey said they're on CFML Slack, because CFML Slack's got a pretty big number of people. And
thousands.
Yeah. So
3,000, I think, I want to say.
I mean, I know some people don't like Slack, it's distracting and whatnot, but it looks like there's a good number of people using Stack Overflow. And then Facebook
That is
groups.
good.
It's like 23% of people using Facebook groups.
Well, to me, the advantage of Stack Overflow and Facebook groups, and the thing you guys autists created in Discourse, is it's a threaded discussion. And so you have a subject line in effect, and then you have, it's threaded, right? And all the comments are in the same place. The problem for me, I have many issues with Slack, I will admit. But one of the issues is everything's interleaved. Someone's talking about subject A, and then someone talks or gives a reply on subject B, and then someone talks about subject G. It's very hard to follow.
They need to create threads. They need to be, religious about creating a thread every time they start a new question.
Yeah.
And that way it can automatically separate it. But you're right. It doesn't last for that long. It's not Google indexable, which is one of the people that people don't like. But you can get to the Slack content. Sean Caulfield set up a link to be able to access Slack content on a site.
Ooh.
And I've got the link somewhere.
Cool.
I'll try and find it. But that is Google indexable.
Excellent.
And
that is important.
And if we take that and then actually do something with it, we can we could basically make that more searchable.
I could archive it.
Yeah, and see the other thing too, like with the autist community, we have a box Slack, and most people get on there to ask questions, and Brad's usually there all the time. But once we get a good enough question and answer thread together, then we usually try and pull it over to the community site and put a bigger answer there so it lives longer. So
that's a good idea.
For the one-off little things, Slack is great.
Sure.
But if it develops something bigger, then we usually try to move it to the community so it can live longer, because we're aware of that. Like we have such great knowledge shared, and not just by autist people in the box team Slack. Sometimes like Sam Knowlton comes in and answers all these questions about Quick and QB, because he's like a little mini, he's a mini Eric when it comes to that stuff. He uses it all the time. And like he answers questions. So there's a lot of great stuff we don't want to lose. So
I understand the immediacy. If you're stuck on something, it's helpful to get. But I find the Facebook groups, people pile in with answers within hours, usually, if not minutes, depending on the question.
Yeah, and a lot of people on Facebook you never see anywhere else.
Well, there you go. It's good to have different groups in different places.
It is, and that's why we try to push a lot of content there.
Yeah, the Adobe Community Portal. There's some good answers and questions there, but it's a lot slower cycle. It might take a week or so, or at least several days. Twitter, a lot of people are on Twitter, but it seems to be more about ColdFusion news and announcements. I don't think I've ever seen someone say, "I'm having this coding problem. Can you help me out?"
Yeah,
doesn't mean you couldn't do that, but
I've noticed that sometimes, like James Moberg will throw out something that he's run into and ask for some feedback or help. I don't think he uses Slack, so that's probably why he uses Twitter. But yeah, I see a lot of little things like that. But you're right. Mainly it's about blogs or events or whatever. And to be honest, a lot of it's autists posting about different things. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, I know. But it's good to see that much people on Twitter using it. And I think it's more. I use it more for professional. I don't touch Facebook during the day when I'm at work, but I'll touch Twitter because it's shorter, more work related. So if I get on Facebook, I get pounded with too much stuff. So I don't touch Facebook at work.
Yes, so. I do actually use Facebook at work because we have a Facebook group for CF Live, and that ColdFusion Programmer group I'll go into. But I do have to be careful not to get addicted to the other crap that's in Facebook. And some people, I have friends who have tools that kind of screen out all the feed and other irritations, so they can just go to the group, do their thing, and come out.
Very good.
LinkedIn does have some. It has one really big, 7,000 or 8,000.
8,000 people in there, so it's good.
But it doesn't seem to be particularly active, as far as I can tell.
No, I think, to be honest, a lot of people join them over the years, and they've kind of moved on. So it shows how many people could have been here, but they're not. But I know, like, when Ben Nadal posts, he's got a pretty big following, so a lot of people check on his stuff. And and like you said, there's a couple of discourse forums too. So there's a Lucy discourse forum, there's an Audis discourse community forum, and then the CF Live. So you guys have the Facebook group, right?
Yeah, we have a Facebook group for that. It's not that active, I'll just be honest. It has some great people in it. When I was publishing my book, that's what I used that to publish chapters of the book, and it was very active then, to kind of give people a preview. I sent draft chapters out. It was kind of like a beta.
Yeah, that's nice.
Kind of thing. And it was
a good idea, actually. Yeah.
Oh, I recommend it for any book or other thing. Have a group of people who are keen on something and give comments, give early feedback. It's a great technique.
That's interesting. 89% say they're in no communities. Then how did they
not 89%,
find out about
21%?
Sorry. Yeah, you're right. 89 people, or 21%. But 21% of the people who filled out the survey, they didn't participate in communities, but they found the survey. That's interesting. So,
well, we send out an email to the entire Teradata list. I think Autis might have done that. I forget this year. I think you guys did.
Usually the people that are on these lists,
Fusion Reactor guys did as well.
Yeah.
So
it's just one of those things. You think if they're on one of those lists, they're probably from some community event. Interesting.
No. There are people who've got onto lists, but they don't engage in communities.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
So, and then there's a whole, Charlie Earhart talks about this. There's people who do ColdFusion 9 to 5, and they just don't want to go spending extra time learning about stuff.
Yeah, I call them the 9 to 5ers, and then I call the other people like me the lifers. We live our life in ColdFusion.
There you go. ColdFusion Life.
Yeah.
So if anyone listening has ideas how we can reach out to people who are, they are doing ColdFusion 9 to 5 and they aren't in online communities, we'd love to hear that, because they may be missing out on some really cool, things they could help make their job easier, make the ColdFusion apps better.
Yep.
So,
and that's the thing is, like, if they do their job well and they've got everything they need, that's fine. But I think a lot of times is, if you have the knowledge available and you choose not to use it, that's one thing, but not knowing it exists is a different thing. And I've met people that have no idea who Ben Nadel is at Adobe Roadshows before, and I'm like, how can you do ColdFusion and not know who Ben Nadel is, or Ray Camden? I'm like,
yes,
but Ray's lower down the list now that he's talking more about Adobe.
Or Charlie Arehart would be,
Oh yeah, but it's just like they're like household names for the last 20 years. You'd think you would have seen them. If you type in CFML in the search engine, you see Ben and Charlie. So if you've ever Googled something, you would have heard of them. But some people live in the hole. But anyway, it's nice to
I do think it's important to know what's available. You don't have to be it's impossible to be an expert on everything ColdFusion. But I think it really does help to know what exists, and that's one of the things I did in my book. I wanted to list all the tools that were available at the time and all the different techniques and what have you. And the same with this survey every year. One of the reasons to look at the survey, even if I'd encourage people to take the survey, but if you don't want to take the survey, at least look at the results and see, well, what are the popular tools? What are the popular sites? What are the techniques that I've missed out on? What are the testing tools? What are the CMSs and whatever? Because if you don't know it exists, you can't even conceive of using it to solve some problem you have.
Yep. And then, of course, when you guys publish the results for the trends of the survey with Brad
coming soon,
you'll be able to see how those tools are got more popular over time, or maybe less popular, and frameworks have gone up and down. I'm really excited to see all that. I've been watching you guys get all the data compiled. So it's going to be great. But this segues really great into the next section, though, is like open source tools. So what tools are out there and available, and are you allowed to use them? And because
yes, we asked it. This was an inspiration I and Brad had a few, because Brad and I and other people around in the community contribute. How can we improve the survey? And one of the things I thought would be useful, because some of us are so steeped in using tools and open source, we can't even conceive that you wouldn't be allowed to at your company. But I thought, no, that there actually are people who aren't allowed to.
No, there's definitely a lot of them. And look, 47% of people are not. Oh, sorry, they are allowed.
Yes,
not allowed. 8%. Yeah,
right.
So,
no, but seriously, there are some companies that have this mentality that open source is dangerous and it might infect their code, or I don't know. I'm exaggerating here, but
yeah,
they have a policy that says they must not use it.
Yeah, and so a lot of times people will reinvent the wheel because they have to. And now, I mean, that's okay too. I mean, sometimes you need to have really strict code reviews, and I know that Ben Nadal talked about that before, where if he uses an open source tool, sometimes it takes a lot more work to get it approved, and maybe it was Adam Tuttle as well. It's like open source tools need they need to be reviewed too, so you didn't write it, so you don't understand it as well, so the other person has to. And one of the things when you use an open source tool is there's like a checklist you should ask yourself, like, does it solve my problems? Does it solve more than I need? Like, does it do way more than I need? Is it too complicated? I did a session with Charlie on the online CF meetup about, like, when should you use a third-party library versus roll your own? And sort of you kind of have to reevaluate some of those things, because sometimes it's not worth using a tool because it does way too much. You need a little piece, and maybe it's going a different direction that you need to go, so yeah. But I think it's interesting to see, most people are using open source. Half of them are allowed to use it, which interesting. It's great.
And some of them are just using it without being allowed to use it.
Yeah, that's
because they don't have any policy, right? They don't have a policy against it, and they're not pro it. But
yeah. And it's really cool to see, like, 27.8% of people are contributing to open source projects. That's great. With Hacktober going on right now, Hacktoberfest, you guys can get t-shirts for contributing to open source projects. But and Hacktoberfest was actually invented so people can learn how to contribute to open source. And so those 11%, hopefully you guys will reach out and we can help you get up to speed, because Hacktoberfest is encouraging people to get involved with open source, whether it's writing documentation or typos. They're still contributing. There's lots of ways you can contribute without writing code. And to be honest, jumping into a repo and trying to write code right away is probably the worst thing you can do. Sometimes it's best to get to know the code, the pull requests flow. Big projects usually have a lot of structure to try and make it easier on the maintainers. But a lot of times they need help with documentation or examples. And like CF Docs is a great resource, and Pete needs help with adding examples, adding different methods. And he's got a huge issue list that he made, because he could do it all, but he made a list so people can contribute. And it's really cool. So, and
no, I encourage people listening to use open source. And if if you can contribute, I've talked about this in other podcasts, there's many ways to contribute.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and you can start off small, you can help fix the documentation or
that's a big one.
Suggestions. Yeah. Yep. So go open source.
Yeah.
What's the next topic here? Podcast channels, which includes podcasts like this one and your one, Modernize or Die.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool. So Modernize or Die podcast, we're number 1. Woo! But CFcast is our video training platform. So a lot of great content there, free and paid. And of course, your CF Alive podcast and our podcast being top 3 is really nice. And it's good to see the Working Code podcast is in there as well. So 9% of people listen to that.
That's less. That's does ColdFusion, but I think they cover other things too, don't they?
Yeah, it's more. Yeah, it's not very ColdFusion based at all. It's people that have worked in ColdFusion before. So it's got Adam Tuttle, Carol Hamilton. She's changed her name recently. I always forget her last name now. And then Tim Cunningham, and then Ben Nadal. But it's interesting because they talk about just developer problems or thought processes, and sometimes it relates to ColdFusion, sometimes it doesn't. So, but it's just good to see the podcast. And Localhost podcast was a really good one too. But lots of YouTube channels here too.
Yeah, there's the Altis YouTube channel, the Adobe one, the Teratech one. There might be one or two others knocking around, but those are the most popular ones. And then there are people who don't have listen to any or watch any channels. So about 50% of people don't. You're missing out, guys. Now, I understand some people love hearing stuff because they're working out or they're commuting or whatever they're doing, and they can listen to the podcast while they're doing something else. I understand that. And not everyone's like that. And some people like to learn by reading, and some people like to watch videos. Some people like to hear stuff. So just to be fair to those people, maybe they just don't learn well by hearing stuff.
Yeah, like videos are really good when you've got time to watch. Sometimes I'll listen to them and see if I actually want to watch them later, because I can't watch them while I'm working, but sometimes I'll listen to see if it covers something I'm actually interested in. But like the Learn CF in a Week, do they actually have video content too, or is it just the Learn CF in a Week website? I didn't know they had stuff I could listen
to. I think
to.
they have some content they put out. I couldn't tell you exactly, but I think they have I'll have to check. Here, let me unshare the screens so I can quickly learn CF, which is a great site, by the way. If anyone hasn't looked at it, even if you know CF, I learned new things by going there. They revamped it for, I think, is it revamped for ColdFusion 2018 or ColdFusion 2021?
Yeah, they just revamped it a couple of years ago. I think the domain expired and then they repurchased it, and it's good.
Not for $50,000 like your domain, though.
I hope not. No, I think it was just more of an Adobe DNS issue or something. But yeah, they got it back up and running. And yeah, they do. They go back and recheck it.
They looks like they have a YouTube. They have some YouTube. Oh no, this is me interviewing them. This is my YouTube. Oops.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, they have some kind of now. They have some kind of channel. I'm a little confused. I'll see if I can find out later.
That was one I wasn't aware of, so maybe that's got something I'd add to my list so I can check out their content. Like I say, you can always learn something from everybody. So
it is good. Well,
this podcast is brought to you by Teratech, the ColdFusion experts. Develop, secure, optimize. Get detailed show notes on today's episode and your free CF Alive Modern ColdFusion Guide at teratech.com. That is teratech.com. And now back to today's show.
Is good. Well, the next topic is deployment. So we're going to look at that next. So this section of the survey covers a whole bunch of deployment questions. How, where you deploy your server, what hosting service you use, security, Docker images, all kinds of stuff. So let's jump into that. First thing in here is what kind of development setups you use, because people often develop on a different setup from production.
Yep, there's definitely a few different flavors here. I mean, in the old school days, we would have that shared development server, which looks like it's like number two and three. A shared development server and that's a shared development database server and a shared development web server. So looks like almost 50% of people are either using a shared database server or shared web server. And then it looks like the top one, obviously, still people are installing their engine on their PC. And command box is up to 44%. And so I like that.
Go command box.
Because that way I can have, Adobe CF 2021 for one client, Adobe CF 2018 for another client, and in command box. And when I spin it up, it spins up the version I want. And then when I'm doing a talk, I can say, well, let's see if this runs in 2018. Let's see if this runs in 2016. I can just make a change, and command box lets me do that. And I can check that version. And nope, it blows up like crazy. I guess this tag wasn't supported in 2016. So let me go back to 2018. So I like that. But, a local installation is pretty common for a lot of people who don't have a lot of clients. So that makes sense. And then, so the people using local development database. So local dev database, 33%. That's kind of nice. It's interesting to see Vagrant and Docker. I haven't used Vagrant for a long time.
No,
I haven't made a Handmade VM for a long time, but some people think Docker is too confusing and they'd prefer to use Vagrant. Yeah.
Oh. And
I was like, I don't think so, but okay.
No.
But so 9% Handmade VM, 3% for Vagrant. and then Docker 25%. So that's pretty good.
And down at the bottom, I code on production 5%.
Yep.
Probably not a good idea, but I understand sometimes people do it.
Yeah, I mean, like debugging production is a little different than coding on production, but and then they don't have a development environment, 6 people.
Yeah.
So I guess that means maybe that they code on production too, because it's 6. Just, you know.
Well, we don't know what the other means. We'd have to look at the writing answers. Yep. Let's have a look at production deployments and setups. So managed servers, I guess that's hosted somewhere, a virtual private server. Those are 2 popular ones. Containers moving up 20%. So fewer people using containers in production than they do on development. And I guess that's, why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it could be AWS, because the AWS AMIs are kind of, I mean, well, I guess they're more like a server too. But I think Docker allows people on whichever, you know, if you're running Windows or Linux or whatever, to run the same environment, the same type of system as your production server. So if you're running Linux in your managed server or your VPS, and you're on a Windows machine, in Docker, you can at least run it in a Linux setup. And so it's more like production. So that's probably why. So it's a way to make your development more like production, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, I mean, building your own servers is still the top. So building your own servers.
I just resorted it so it could come to the top.
So those are people that basically have a server and they manage everything themselves. The managed servers people are actually having someone like Hosttech basically manage the server, and they just put their code on and run it, where the VPS is basically, you know, a virtual private server. And so that's probably a mixture of manage and build your own. But shared hosting is still there. There's not as many people running that anymore. And I know that
with containers, what's the point? You know,
well, it's
you
the
can get it
price
as
point.
cheap with a container, isn't it?
No.
But you can get a container for about, they start at $5 on DigitalOcean.
Yeah. So if I get, say I have
just
10
for a decent
sites.
load, you can have.
Yeah.
Well, they could all be on the same container, mate.
Well, but the thing is, then you've got to set it up the right way, right? So setting up a container to be multi-support, it's not as easy. So like most of the out of the box ones have one server. You can do it. And command box, we just updated it to let you to do like the connector stuff. So we could actually run one command box Docker image with multiple sites. Now, previously that wasn't available. And so the shared hosting, that was just easy way to say, hey, I got a server, I can spin them up, you know, I'll share my CPU, I'll share my RAM. And if, you know, if I need that 2 gigs of RAM when I spin up my site, I can use it, but then everybody else can use it after that. And so it's a lot cheaper. But I think if we start doing more, you know, multi-site sort of Docker, like you said, you can do it. It's just not easy right now. I think it's going to improve. It's going to go higher as we go forward. But even if you have your own managed servers, you probably still want to shove Docker on there. I love the fact that I can put a Docker swarm on a single instance. So even if I just have one server, I just say Docker swarm init, and now it's a swarm. Even though there's only one item. And if I start up a service like my ColdFusion server, even if it's just Lucy, and I have all my sites and folders are all mapped, if Lucy crashes, it'll restart the image because it's in a swarm mode. It'll restart that service. It'll never die. When it dies, it starts again. And so it just stops me from having to go re-init it. So on my old legacy stuff where I don't want to pay per Docker image, I have one big Docker image with all my old legacy sites in there for my old customers, you know, like friends and family that have little blogs. They can all run in one container. They can share the memory and RAM, but on the swarm mode, it'll at least restart itself. You know, there's some health checks and stuff. And so that works. But yeah, it was harder to get set up. So things are definitely on the improve.
Let us move on to hosting services, things we're talking about hosting.
Yep.
Always a popular question on the forums.
Yeah. So in-house.
So most people are doing in-house.
Well, AWS is just as high, 34.1% each.
Equal.
Yeah, that's very good. And then
Hosttech is the top, you know, actual ColdFusion host. And then DigitalOcean, Microsoft Azure, they're all cloud.
Yep.
things. And then Rackspace, I think that's a virtual private thing. I don't think they do ColdFusion per se.
No, they don't. Linode's the same. You can do a bit of both. But yeah, you can do co-location with Rackspace and stuff. But most of these ones now are you can basically spin up a managed server or a VPS or just a bare metal box. But Linode's actually got some really good deals. They got some good pricing, and they're help support TriCF. They give TriCF Abram Adams some good pricing on all that stuff to be able to provide that for the community. So it's really nice to have that. So if you're not sure who you want to go, Linode is a good one to support. So, but Vivio, they're obviously a big ColdFusion host, and then we also have the host. Well, Host My Site. I used to use them. So they used to have ColdFusion hosting. We did co-locating with them for a while. They got purchased by hosting.com. They got some of the different services got sold out. So there's very little ColdFusion left in Host My Site. And I think it's hosting.com now, and their official name, I thought it was like Net. I don't know. There's a new name.
Net
so
Infinity
they've changed the
or
name.
something.
I don't think it's that.
We had some clients who were, they got moved into it didn't work very well.
I just shut down my rack.
Yeah.
Because in Irvine, they had a co-location location. And so we had 10 servers, 10 servers in a rack there for one of my clients. And we finally got them all moved over to cloud stuff after all this time. Yeah. Because again, they just had
and then the same thing happened. So. This is very common with hosting companies. They get bought out by larger hosting companies and rolled up. And then unfortunately, unless you're lucky, they kind of lose the engineering talent and help support. And that happened, I think, with Edge. Edge hosting used to be a really high quality ColdFusion host. They kind of, moved. They continue with the ColdFusion, but they got bought out by DataBank, and they still do the ColdFusion. They still have some good engineers there, but it's clearly got a bit diluted.
Yeah, so. And that's the thing is we need to support more of these smaller hosts, and it's because we got sort of two developer personas here, right? We got people that are doing their own hobby sites and everything, and then small businesses. And most people these days with Docker and the VPS prices, you can get your own little VPS, but it's a shared hosting, sort of like friends and family or your little hobby blog that we just don't have a very good host for right now. Hostic is doing some good stuff there. They're trying to improve, and Ortus is trying to work with some of these hosts and ColdFusion too to try and get better.
Maybe there's an opportunity to set up a hosting company in El Salvador.
Well, we could. We've talked about it for a lot of El Salvador customers down there.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people that are wanting good hosting, and whether it's static or not, and trying to take advantage of Cloudflare, CDNs, and other things. So we're trying to just do what we can, because that's something we hear a lot is like people want good ColdFusion hosting. And
I think just to be fair to hosting companies, having talked to people who run hosting companies, it can be a lot of work. You may think, they're not doing anything. They're always doing updates, and then people complain about stuff or they're having problems.
Yeah. It's one of those things that you only hear from the customer when they're mad. It's not a very good environment, but Hostic and Vivio, I've used both of them for different things, and I've been really happy with them. But support is expensive, and it's not their fault that it's expensive, but it is expensive. And you either pay for it in your services or you get cheaper services, but then you have to pay more for support. But you know what it's like. If something goes down, it could be a long time to fix it. So it's tough, but it's hard to be secure too. There's a lot of security issues, and when you're doing shared hosting, there's a lot. So it's something that we have to understand. And I think if you can support like Vivio and Hostic, that's great. And when you get to VPS and stuff, they have some good offerings there too. But then
they have great offerings. Yeah.
There's a lot of other tools out there. If you're going DigitalOcean or AWS, there's a lot of great options. So it looks like people are choosing some pretty good ones here. And I just actually found a customer. They're switching to Oracle Cloud. I never even heard of it. So Oracle has their own cloud platform. So first customer ever that's moving there. So
wow.
Yeah, and Google's not on that list either, right? Google Cloud Platform?
No, Google Cloud wasn't on there. We should add Google here. I'll write in Google Cloud into the thing. I know I'm screen sharing, but
further up.
Yeah, it was further up. It's here.
Yeah, so Google Cloud.
Google Cloud
And I mean, maybe we could do Oracle, but there's tons out there. Like there's Vulture and a bunch, but they're all very much like clones of other ones, you know.
I'm not spelling it right, but there's some Chinese company. I think it's called Abelia or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot.
They have an AWS knockoff that's about a quarter of the price. It has most of the features.
There's a lot of great options out there for sure.
I'm not sure I really want to host my sites on a Chinese server. Apologies to any Chinese people listening, but
for sure,
I'm just a bit concerned about the Chinese government. So, for those people doing Docker, let's look at what Docker images folks are using. So, number one, this command box image.
Well, that says with Lucy, and you'll see that there are some using command box with the Adobe ones as well. But it looks like a lot of people are doing their custom image. And so that's pretty close behind. And that's kind of nice. I mean, that's the thing with Docker, you can kind of pick and choose, but your official Lucy image and the official Adobe images, they've improved a lot. For a few years ago when they first came out, the Ortus one, like I think was leaps and bounds ahead because we built all the tools that were driving us crazy to make it better. And so, they've really done a lot of things to improve. And Charlie did a great session at the end of the box pre-conference on the 3 different images and what's good, and like different setup configurations. But there's a lot of good stuff in there. And there's some, similarities and some differences, but yeah, Charlie did a good session on that. And I think that's probably a good talk. I'll try and get the link for you later. But
Clemente.
But yeah, so there's a lot of good options there. But the custom image, like you can take the Lucy one or the Adobe one or the command box one and build on top of that. And we highly recommend taking the command box one and building a multi-stage on top of it, because you can even finalize your code when you release it. So it's all like it's already Java byte compiled and everything. And like we actually get rid of command box and just give you straight to Undertow. So like there's none of that starting up. Like you're straight into it. Like they start like that. They're crazy fast. So when you get to the production deployment, you can really strip down all the pieces, and it's really great. And John Clausen has done an amazing job with all that stuff. He just did a blog post a couple of weeks ago about crunching your stuff down to Java bytecode to make it even faster. So I'll put a link for that in there too. But it's a really cool talk. So you can definitely do some good stuff with all of them. But using a Docker image, building on top of it, it's pretty cool. And with Docker Compose, you could spin up a Redis server alongside of it and everything as well. So you could do some Redis caching and scale. It's really
let's talk about deployment tools then. What tools do people use for deploying? I'm shocked. Most people are using FTP.
I'm not shocked at all.
You're not shocked?
No, unfortunately, a lot of people are still using FTP. But I mean, the good thing is FTP works. Now, are you FTPing from your local machine to production? That may not be as friendly, but sometimes you can use a pipeline, and then the last step could still be an FTP at the end. If you're not using Docker or something, you could use rsync or FTP to get the files out there in the end. And that's still cool. Whatever it takes. But there's a lot of pipelines here.
Yes,
we've got the
pipeline scripting tools.
Yeah,
Jenkins, GitLab, Git Actions, Bitbucket pipelines.
Yep.
Command box task runners, Azure DevOps, AWS code deploy, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so there's a lot of the different ones here, but yeah, GitHub Actions has come a long way because obviously when Microsoft took over GitHub and made private stuff free unless you have big teams and everything, then they added GitHub Actions. Like that killed a lot of Travis's work and Circle CI. A lot of people on GitHub before were using both of them, but GitHub Actions is pretty neat. GitLab's got some great CI tools. I love using their CI tools, but Bitbucket, they're pretty good too. Customers using Bitbucket, and so their pipelines, they're pretty great too. And then inside of those, obviously you'll use Bash and Gulp. Sometimes people still use Ant. We use command box task runners a lot for running our tests and doing all those little pieces during our build. But yeah, there's a lot of great ones here, and they're all got very similar features. So a lot of it comes down to where's your source control. If your source control is at one of them, you can use that. But like Bitbucket, GitHub, and GitLab all have great source controlled tools now, and their pipelines are all very good, and they're a little different, but that
And
number
then
down
about
the bottom.
third of people don't automate their deployments or builds. They're missing out.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people do FTP and stuff like that, but even that, I would have some type of rsync script that I run from bash, so I only update the files that have changed, or something. But then again, that's just me. If you do something more than 3 or 4 times, it's probably worth automating it, whether it's a bash script or if you're using PowerShell, write a PowerShell script, something to just make it more repetitive. A lot of our repos actually have a workbench folder, and inside that we have scripts that you run for deploying to dev or deploying to production, and it'll actually do certain things. That was before we had cool pipelines. So highly recommend using something, but each to their own.
There you go. Let us move on to question 40, which is about monitoring tools. Make sure your ColdFusion isn't going slow or crashing. Most popular monitoring tool in the survey, folks, is
Fusion Reactor. It's a great tool.
Yes, it is a great tool. And it just came out with version 9. I'm going to be interviewing David Tattersall from Integral, who make Fusion Reactor, in a few weeks. Really valuable. And then there's the built-in ColdFusion performance monitor that comes with Adobe ColdFusion 2018 and 2021. Then there's some various other ones, but they're a lot smaller use. Homegrown, CloudWatch, Datadog, CFusion.
I'm surprised CFusion is so far down. That's a pretty solid product.
It isn't being maintained, I don't think.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I know Charlie will
not as
tool
actively. Not as actively as Fusion Reactor. They're
Fusion
always
Reactor,
adding.
Yeah, they definitely do a lot more. They're a lot more visible, but they also do stuff for JVM, other JVM languages. So they try to build tools that work for ColdFusion and other people. But ones on there that I don't see, which I'm surprised about, is like Sentry for more bug logging, but maybe that's something different. But Datadog sort of bug logging, so New Relic can do that. So Sentry is a big one we use. Rollbar is another one we've used in the past, but it's not really a monitor. Now CB Debugger is a cool tool that we're using on a per request basis for debugging stuff. But yeah, for the overall stuff, maybe they don't do enough of that. But I know a lot of people using their own APM, like maybe that's a homegrown and custom, where they sort of build into Grafana using Elasticsearch and tie into all sorts of interesting things. I wish I knew more about that. Some of our customers have some pretty cool setups for that. So
cool.
But yeah, that's good to see.
It is. Let's look at how people make their servers more secure. So
the official lockdown guides, 56%.
Yeah, that's quite a lot of work to go through that. I forget how many pages are in that lockdown guide, but it's a lot of steps in it. Now, fortunately, the Adobe ColdFusion 2021 automates some of that. You can click a button and it'll.
And that's the secure profile on Adobe CF, right?
No, there is that, but I think they have don't they have some kind of thing you can say, lock down my server?
I thought that was their secure profile. Maybe you're right. Maybe, but yeah, I'll see, like the CF config is what Audis is built to try and do that. So when you say apply lockdown settings, it'll basically take those lockdown guides and do all those settings for you. And then you can just go and undo the things that you want to, relinquish. There's good reasons to not do everything in the guide, but you should follow it until there's a good reason not to. But yeah, I know a lot of people have ops people that handle that, but having those lockdown guides in place is definitely help a lot. Now, server profiles is new in Command Box, but if you're in production mode in Command Box now, it automatically does a lot of the lockdown guide type stuff for you, so that you can't get to the admins and stuff like that. And so when it first came out, a lot of people didn't realize, and then they couldn't get to their local Command Box admins because they didn't have a development environment set. So it thought they were in production on their local machine. But yeah, server profiles is pretty interesting, and you can customize that too. So that's kind of cool. But
it looks like most ColdFusion developers are doing something for security. There's only 4% who don't do So that's good news.
Yeah, for sure. We have some government customers using CFconfig type tools where they basically just overlay some settings based on their government requirements, and it's CFconfig makes that so much easier now. I couldn't imagine having to go click around 20 servers like the old days.
No, it's much better. Well, now let's look at the results of that. How many people have been hacked? Most people were not hacked in the last 2 years from a CF-based vector, 90%. And then cross-site scripting, vulnerable app code, SQL injection, zero-day issue, just a few things there, but not that many over a 2-year period. So
it's still a decent number considering, only 2 years and a couple hundred people still. But yeah, a lot of things we can easily, resolve. The zero-day issues, whatever, it's hard to keep up with. Adobe and Lucy are pretty good about keeping up with that. But SQL params, like we should be able to do something to prevent that. We've got tools to check for query param, var scoping, and other things. So, but yeah, patching can be a headache. So
yeah, you've got to keep on top of it. I mean,
Yep. And that's where that HackCF tool comes in handy, right? With reporting on your server. So another plug for Foundeo's Hack My CF.
It's only $10 a server a month. So if you've got a professional site, there's no excuse not to use it, I feel.
Yep.
And
I think it's great.
Not only that, Pete sends out great alerts about any new issues or new patches or zero-day issues. When there are very few zero-day issues. I think there's one every 2 or 3 years, which is way smaller than a lot of other languages.
Yeah. And they're pretty quick about it. I mean, really, that's one thing Adobe does step up on security. That zero-day, that is one thing they do really well.
They do. Let's move over, look at who's using AWS Lambda, or how many people. Most people aren't using it and don't plan to. That's 2/3 of people, and then maybe 1/5 of people would like to stand it, and then there's a few percent of people who are using Lambda. What are your thoughts on that, Gavin?
Well, I've used them a little bit just to play with them, but I used the Node stuff before we had the Fuse list, and it was kind of nice. I haven't played the Lucy's Fuse list from Foundeo yet. I'd like to. A lot of it's trying to figure out, like, okay, when would it be useful? What would I want to use it for? Because a lot of things that I don't want ColdFusion to do usually is something I want to do some big processing. So I'll do it through a queue or another process, like use a rabbit queue to stack up a bunch of videos, and then I can have it go and process them somewhere else. So I'm not sure the use for it, but I know Adobe's 2021 Lambda is pretty cool and new, but I haven't tried that either. I'm kind of curious what's the difference between them and how they work, but yeah, it's kind of nice that we have those options now. So I really am, but I haven't played with them. Have you played with the CFML versions?
No, I haven't. We haven't had a use case really. So
maybe
I can see if you're providing a service like, Pete has that Fixnator service that checks your code for security issues. That all runs through Lambda, and I think that's why he created that.
So maybe we can do some code checker type things, or maybe a CF format type thing. But see, most of that stuff needs to run local to your code, is what I'm thinking, unless your code's up there already. So yeah, if anyone's got some ideas, let us know, because I'd like to play with it. I'd like to see what people are using it for.
Yeah, I think it's any kind of thing that's not, doesn't have to be time critical, and it's doing some like your example of videos is potentially a use for it, but
they're just not very long lived. That's sort of the key. Right. That's why I'm sort of curious. I mean, I'd probably use Lambdas in a workflow where you upload the video and then you transfer it to this bucket so it can do this, and then the Lambda might transfer it to the next one, or but
maybe queues are a better way to deal with that.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're doing a whole bunch of emails, then AWS Lambda might work for that, where you can spin up 1,000 at once, send out 1,000 emails. Maybe that's a good point. Yeah, I just need to figure out the use case, and then I'll probably be all over it.
There you go. All right. I think 44. Yeah, we're now into the wrap-up section. This is the more general questions. So we ask questions about why people are using ColdFusion. And let me just look at this. What's once you're doing ColdFusion, what's preventing you using it? Technology stack plans, salary ranges, how people do their work, whether they contract or permanent, and industry people are in. So let's have a look through those in this final section. So what's the top reason people use ColdFusion?
It's fun to code in.
Absolutely.
Now, is it fun to code in because it's fast to learn, or is it
fun?
I don't know, but it's fun. I mean, it's fun because you can get stuff done, and it's probably fun because it's fast to learn. So you get stuff done fast when you're learning, and that makes it fun. So,
and related to that, it's less lines of code to do the same thing.
Yep, a lot of times.
So
yeah.
Now those are all positive reasons, as are runs fast, supportive community, good security, good docs. This one is more of a negative reason, that they've got a ton of legacy code and they don't want to have to rewrite it, and probably wise not to totally rewrite it, because I've talked to customers who've tried to rewrite ColdFusion apps and it was disaster zone, because it took years and they didn't get it completed.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is a lot of people see legacy code as a big negative. It's like, it's existing code. I like the term prior investment. So if you've got all your business logic in ColdFusion, even if it's great code and you want to switch over, the business logic is there, and that is a prior investment. You've got a lot of logic and business rules in your code, and that is a big thing, and it's going to take time to replicate that. And I know a lot of people that do try those big rewrites. The biggest thing is that the transfer of knowledge, the transfer of business rules, those things are very, very hard to move into a new. I can build a new site, I can build a new admin, I can build all these new tools, but all those intricacies of that business knowledge, that is the big investment. That's the big, cost. And that's the big issue when you're trying to rewrite it. And so a lot of times, I think if people can keep their business logic very separate from what they're using it for, a lot of times it's easy to translate and move to other languages. And so the funny thing is that the reason that we might not be able to migrate away from ColdFusion code is because we don't write it, clean enough. So if it was cleaner, it would be easy to get away from. But that's kind of an interesting, thought process. But a lot of times our logic is tied into the processing, into the display. It's in there. It's deeply embedded in our code, and so it is a big investment.
And then one of the flavors of ColdFusion is made by a big company that's obviously not going away, Adobe. So and they've got a roadmap for the next 10 years. So
I mean, a lot of people
we're already getting ready to have 2023 Adobe ColdFusion release. So I think that'll come out early next year, I'm hoping.
Yep, they're gonna tease it at Thanksgiving time. But and then it's obviously we got some nice IDE choices and plugins. We've got a lot of nice tools too now. Like Otis works on a lot.
We should add that in here.
Yeah, because that's the thing. A lot of people left back in 2012. I think 2012, 2013.
Yes.
A lot of people left because other tools had, better VM support, command line tools, other coding tools and linters and formatters and, containerization. Like there was just way more support for all of those things.
Not true anymore.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like Otis made a conscious effort back in like 2012, was like, well, Adobe's not going to put these things out, so we're going to build them. And so we built a CLI, we built a configuration management tool, we built a package manager for ForgeBox. We built all these tools, and all the things we keep putting out there is to make it easier for us to use, but the community and the language. And I think a lot of the reasons people used to leave, we've sort of filled the gaps, right? There's still stuff we could build and improve, but people left in droves because there was lacking a lot of things. I think we've solved a lot of those problems.
Well, they left around Adobe ColdFusion 9 version. That's typically where a chunk of people left. In my conversations with people.
And the script.
I'm forgetting when Adobe bought out Macromedia. Do you remember when that was?
I think that was in 7.
Okay, so it was a little bit after that, but there was some shift that happened, and I can't quite put my finger on what it was.
Yeah, it was not too long after that, and I know everyone was getting mad. They still had to write everything in tags because the script syntax was only partially there. They wanted to write script, and there was no, a lot of tools were missing. And like a lot of other languages were doing some really cool scaffolding and CLI tools and a lot of great stuff. And so again, the people in the community sort of banded together, and between us, we've covered that. We've got a linter now, we've got a formatter, we've got Basca, and Vandeo, and Pete has done a lot of stuff with security. So yeah, there's a lot of improvements. So I think a lot of those reasons people leaving, not so valid anymore.
No, they are not. Though I did make a note just now to see if I can reach the people who did leave to find out if they remember why they left.
Yeah, I mean, like Hal Hems wrote a pretty big scathing post about it, but I mean,
did he?
Oh yeah, he wrote a pretty big one, but he came back for a while, then he left again. But yeah,
he's an interesting guy, Hal Helms.
Yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of people leave.
Let's look at what's preventing people from embracing ColdFusion or their company. So most people said nothing is preventing them. But the top other reason behind that is hard to find ColdFusion developers.
Yeah, these are the big negatives for sure. People are complaining about finding hard to find CF developers, but there's also a lot of people saying it's hard to find good ColdFusion jobs. So yes. I'm wondering if the people who are looking for developers aren't modern, because no one wants to go work in a cruddy old system that aren't using the tools. Like if you're going to go develop, you want to work for someone who's using modern tools and good code base, or plans to make a good code base. You want to have a company where people want to work, and so that might be easier. But there are developers that are looking, but it is harder to find experienced developers with that expertise. But there are new ones coming through, and you can train them, and that's what we're having to do for a lot of things. And that kind of happens in most languages. You don't get experts coming in. A lot of times you got to train them because you don't want to pay the experts. So.
And then a second issue is cost and licensing issues. And I know there's been a lot of debate about how the current Adobe licensing is, confusing and can be expensive.
And that was another big thing coming out of CF Summit. They're changing the policies to be more container and flexible licensing friendly. So I think that's a big one, because for the last 3 years since Docker came out, Adobe didn't know. We didn't know.
Docker came out.
Oh yeah, a long time ago.
A long time ago.
But for the last 3 years, we've been asking Adobe, okay, well, does enterprise license cover one server, one instance, one?
Right.
Is it per core? Because if it's per cores, and
there's all sorts of. It was very confusing. So I'm very happy they've streamlined that. I did bring that up with the Adobe community, Mark. I didn't know whether I should say his name or not, because he got some heat for that episode on the back end. But I was just telling the truth. I'm just passing on what people tell me.
Yeah, it's been tough because people don't know, and basically they had to sit down to find out what the licensing was, because it's tough. If you have a VM which has 12 cores, but you're only using 2 of them on your Docker image, should you pay for 12 or should you pay for 2? And if you spin it up for 2 weeks at Christmas to double it, do you need to go buy more licenses, or should it be flexible? It's right. They were very much old school. You install a server, you buy a license, but today is not working that way, and they're embracing that, and that's great.
Well, that's good. That's good news. So maybe this will go down next year. And then other reasons causing people issues: lack of marketing or press around ColdFusion.
Yeah. Only 20% said that, which I'm surprised, because I think that's probably 80% of the people. Because that's
apparently not.
That's why management doesn't like it either.
Well, that may be true. These may be related. And then this is the flip side of hard to find developers. It's hard to find CF work. Then issues with legacy code. Well, that's true whatever language you write in, guys. Sorry to disillusion you, but there's legacy code in pretty much every language. And then various other smaller issues around bugs or clients who don't like ColdFusion, which is probably related to the management, or marketing. IDE documentation, cloud support, tech support, security issue. Very few people think security is an issue. I think that. I think that's a false perception. I really, having studied the security of other languages, they're a lot worse.
Yeah, they are.
ColdFusion is near the top
does
of the
have
pack.
a lot of wins there, to be honest. Yep, I think you're right. But yeah, it's interesting. But most of them come around to people are leaving the language because clients won't let them use it. Their management doesn't like them because everybody thinks it's dead. So
but it's not, and that's why
though.
People who evangelize it, like Mark Takana or yourself or Brad or Luis or me or Charlie or Ben, I think that is an important. I mean, I know we're not as big as Adobe by anywhere close, but it's a kind of grassroots thing, and people listening can help. You just blog about it or tweet about it or contribute to open
someone else
source.
does. Yep.
Right. Then it all helps create a difference there. And also coming back to those communities, if you write on a community that's Googleable, like Stack Exchange or the Audis one or whatever, then it becomes visible that people are using it, So I think everyone listening can do something to help.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be number one. But there's a lot of languages out there. Ruby's getting the whole Ruby's dead thing too, and I'm like, finally, someone else can suffer the same thing we are. But
most languages that are more than 3 years old have the language is dying thing. It's something that programmers seem to enjoy, kind of being negative towards the language or creating fear or something. I haven't quite put my finger on where this comes from, but I've looked into language, PHP is dying or Ruby is dying or whatever. And it typically starts just a few years after the language has come out, which is totally effing ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just starting to get some maturity and following,
Right.
But yeah.
I mean, it would be like with humans, like you've just got a toddler who's learned to walk and now you're saying they're dying. I don't think that's a helpful and productive thing to be doing, guys.
For sure.
Anyway, let's move on to something less morbid. Let's have a look at companies' plans for their technology stack. So what are the results here?
Are using Adobe and they have no plans to migrate. 38% are using Lucy and have no plans to migrate. 23% are migrating from CFML to another language. That's almost a quarter of the people are migrating away from the language. Now, there's 2% that are migrating from another language to ColdFusion. But there's a few people that are moving.
Whoops, did I do something there?
Yeah, I think you dragged it.
Yeah,
but the interesting one is we've got 18% of people are moving from Adobe to Lucy, probably for licensing, but we have 0.7% moving from Lucy back to Adobe. And I actually have talked to a few people moving back to Adobe because they need that support. They need to be able to get someone, they pay for the support. They need someone to jump on something. And, Adobe gets a lot of slack for a lot of things, but if you're a paid support customer, they will roll out a hotfix. They will roll out things. If something is broken, they do support you. Now, will they add a feature that you want? That's not always going to happen. Will they fix something to work the way you think it should? That's not always going to happen. But if there's something broken, they're pretty good about rolling it out. And some people complain that Lucy are not as respondent.
Adobe have a much bigger engineering team than Lucy. I don't know quite how many engineers, because obviously Lucy is open source. So, there are some people who kind of work for the Lucy Foundation, but then there are other people who volunteer.
Yeah, they're only part-time at Lucy as well.
So,
they work for other companies.
I want to say there's at least 30 engineers working on Adobe ColdFusion, and they churn out fixes and features every 2 years, apart from the COVID year. They publish a new release,
Yeah, but they probably only released 2020 and 2021 because they didn't want to have the name 2020 on it because of all the bad juju with COVID in 2020. Like, I'm not naming it that.
No, that was exactly why they did that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it did. Everyone's engineering team took a hit during COVID because people were working from home, and if you're used to working together in an office, it takes a bit of a time to get up to speed. I mean, we've been doing it at TerraTech for 12 years now, and you guys have been doing it since you started, I want to say, didn't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, but a lot of people weren't.
Yeah. So out of this question, I don't know if we can ask a follow-up next time. For the people that are moving to another language, I wonder what language they're moving to.
We did have that data. Let me see if I can find that for you. I was prepared.
Oh, see, because that's something I am interested in.
So he said, if you're moving from CFL to another language, what language are you going to? So unfortunately, it's not statistically whatever, but
so Go, some
you can
.NET,
see
Node,
Python,
Spring Boot, Python, Node,
PHP, ASP.
PHP.
So all the other usual suspects, I would say.
Yeah, but it's just kind of interesting to see the mix. So
yeah, and there's 4 pages of these, so you can. I mean, I guess we could analyze. Maybe we can get Brad to analyze this.
Yeah, that's just
a
curious.
Little random Rooney, isn't it?
Yeah, and see, I know a lot of people are moving to other, sort of other things where they're moving to Laravel, because Laravel is a big framework with a lot of tools for PHP. So they're not moving to PHP because it's PHP. They're moving to an established solid framework like Laravel. People aren't moving to Java necessarily. You see them, they say, I'm moving to Spring Boot.
Yes.
Because Spring Boot is a great, framework on Java. See, Java
Yeah,
Spring.
I'm not seeing any patterns in this. I would say just take
mix.
all the other web development languages. They all get a share of where people are going. And to be honest, in my experience, this is not a technical decision. It's not because ColdFusion doesn't run fast. It's not because it's not secure. It's not, it is secure. It is reliable. It does run fast. It is fast programming. It is typically a political decision made at a high level in the organization.
People that don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, the CEO's, husband was at a cocktail party and they heard Java was hot, or or there's a new CTO came in and they just love Ruby on Rails, and that's what they're going to get everything coded in.
Or JetBrains is behind Kotlin and they're pumping millions of dollars into marketing. Or there's another one that Red Hat's just started. I don't even remember the name of it, but if you look at DevNexus, half the sessions were on that language because they basically sponsored the conference, and that's what it's doing.
Let's look at money. What salary are people making?
Money.
So looks like the median, the most popular salary is about 105 to 114K a year. But there's plenty of people at 75K or 95K. And then, there are still people who, it depends where you live, right? If you live in the Bay Area,
that's what I was
you're going to have to make a lot more money just to get a not such big house.
We might need to throw that in next year, have your US dollars, but maybe we could have a website link that takes them to that, your salary by geographic region. Put your salary in here and figure out what it's worth. Because someone in Peru, for example, making 50K US might be like you're living rich,
Absolutely. Very rich. I mean, typical average salary here, I want to say, is 1,000 soles a month, which is $250. So programmers obviously make more than the average salary because, average might be a factory worker or something. But
that's why a lot of people move to different countries once they get the remote status, and they can do that.
Sure.
I mean, they can make a lot more money. And
absolutely.
That's why a lot of startups move to Thailand and South America when they're getting started, because they can live on the cheap and build up their company. And
oh yeah, if anyone here is remote and hasn't tried living in other places, definitely worth trying. And you can move, you don't have to get stuck in one place. You could try different places, see what you like. It's definitely,
especially if it's time zone friendly, because I know that time zones obviously can make it tough.
Thailand is not time zone friendly to the United States. It's sort of okay with Europe.
I worked remotely in New Zealand a little bit when I go on vacation. I stay a little longer. It's only 3 hours off in the winter. 3 hours off Pacific in the winter and 5 in the summer. So
but that means it's 6 hours off Eastern and 8 hours at the other end. So
I worked on a team with a remote Indian team for a while, so I was getting up at 5 a.m. for stand-ups, and then I would have 5 p.m. stand-ups when they got up.
At the other end.
So we have 2 stand-ups a day, because each team would have to hand off one to the other.
Global teams. I did an interview with someone about global teams. It's quite a challenge to be able to do that. But there's definitely, anyone listening who can work remote, if you haven't tried, even just within the United States, you can, Brad lives in Kansas, doesn't he? I think.
Yep. The oldest team has a big spread. We had Bill used to live in Hawaii. And then we got the El Salvadorian team. Luis now lives in Malaga, Spain. He used to live in Texas, but we've got Grand Rapids, Michigan. We've got Chicago. We've got Kansas. We've got.
But the point I was trying to make is, if you don't have to be in a big city like Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York City or Washington, D.C., you can have a better, in my opinion, a better quality of life. And, your money goes 2 or 3 times further in Kansas than it does in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's a different power ratio when you're up.
And then I have talked to some CF developers who don't even have a house. They have a mobile, what do you call them, an RV? They have the satellite internet and an RV. And I'm forgetting the guy's name, but there's quite a famous CFO who was doing that for a while.
Yeah, if I could get a slightly better internet when I was on the travel, I'd be doing that more. When I go on vacation, there's like certain parts of South Dakota where it's a black hole. The Black Hills are a black hole, just so you know, in South Dakota.
Okay.
So, but yeah,
yes.
I mean, we go RV and I'll use my my phone tether or the satellite, but yeah, I need to get a better one if I'm going to go full time. That's for sure. But you can definitely do it. Remote stuff is great. I think it's really good, and COVID let people see that. And
yes. And we've got the question, what's your current arrangement? And the remote was a third of the people answering. So we'll see if that continues next year, because some companies are trying to get people to go back to the office. But
so 34% remote versus 41 in-house. We got almost 50% of the people are salaried, where we've got some contract and some self-employed. But 25% of people running contracts still. That's interesting. And then a few unemployed, a couple of students. So basically,
we need more students.
Yes, we do. We definitely do. But
yes,
yeah,
but that's
a lot of people
question.
run their own business. But yeah, the salary, that's pretty good. I mean, the thing is with contract, I'm wondering if that's because they only need help when they need it, or is it sort of self-employed contract? It's interesting though that
I don't know the
developers.
Difference. Yeah, contract to me implies they've got like a permanent position somewhere, but they're not an employee. They're done through a contract agency.
Okay, I got it. So yeah,
and then self-employed probably means they've got their own business and they've got several clients. Contract typically they just have one client.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of. I guess I was self-employed when I did my more contracting stuff. But that's a good mix. So
it is. Let's look at industries people are in. What's the top industry? I'm not surprised here, but reveal it to our listeners.
Information technology at 42%, but education, healthcare, government, and corporate are all 17, 13, and 11%. Little financial, little wholesale. And interesting. Manufacturing and transport's only 4% and 3%. Telecoms and agriculture down in the ones. And then mining and natural resources at 0.5%. But I think that makes sense for a lot of it. But
and then I don't know what we're missing in the other category. We'll have to scan the
18%.
Results. Yeah,
18% of other.
Yeah, I know. We'll investigate that, because every year when we do this survey, we look at what people write in the other category and see is there something that's really big that should have been listed. So this was our first year with this question, because it is interesting to see where people work. So that is the final question with checkboxes, and then there is a is this the one?
Additional comments, right?
There's additional comments. So let me bring out the additional comments, see if anything stands out to you. All kinds of things being said here.
Someone thinks CF got snobby. Sorry, guys.
That's not my impression, but I can understand sometimes people can be snappy. And I think it's got, I will say, I've noticed, I do LinkedIn posts twice a week. And normally either no one comments or I get a few, interesting comments. But in the last month, I've had people come up with all kinds of crazy, well, not all kinds. I've had 2 people. One person said, well, it's no point talking about ColdFusion because it's going to be a nuclear war and everyone will be dead. Okay, well, I hope not, but, And then someone else it's like, I don't know what was going on for them, but they seem to be a bit. I think people are under a lot of mental stress is the point I wanted to make. So, and I've talked about this on the show and I've written about it. And I think, if you're feeling stressed, get some help. Some support.
For sure. It's something we shouldn't mess around with. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I think people should go check out the survey results online and go look through them and read some of the comments. Obviously, we try to give a summary of the numbers and the stats. And if you guys are watching the videos, you get to see all the pretty graphs as well. But yeah, the other thing too is some of the questions in here, like, obviously we're using ColdFusion. I'd like to see more of why people aren't using ColdFusion, from those who aren't using it, and I bet
that's a good point. We should maybe do a survey of people who either have never used it and don't even know what it is, or know what it is but don't really understand it, or the people who left. Those are two interesting demographics to contemplate. Question is, how do you reach them?
Yep, that is tough. But I'm wondering if it's those types of things where it's like, I know you used to be involved with CF United. I'm wondering if you still have access to some of the emails. Maybe some of them are still around. Email them and just say, hey, would love you guys to fill in a survey. We're curious who's still using CF, who moved on, and if so, why and where to, and
right.
Just we're sort of curious. I mean, and like I know the CF Objective conference, CF Camp probably has some too, and we get in touch with the contact people from Scotch on the Rocks. Like run some of those old conference people, because they would have had attendee lists, and like reach out, because I know a lot of people that aren't doing ColdFusion now. And on the Working Code podcast, they were talking about it's like it'd be really great just to hang out with a bunch of people who used to go to all these conferences that you haven't seen in forever because they've moved on, So we could have the Undead conference.
I think that's a great idea. They have to be motivated to want to fill it in, right? That's the problem with surveys. I can't think what the right phrase is, but the people who fill it in a survey are self-selecting.
Yeah, the intrinsic motivation needs to be there. But, maybe you say is like, look, a lot of people are asking us, if, should they stay with ColdFusion or should they move on? We'd like to see your thoughts. Have you moved on? Where have you gone and how did it treat you? And if you're staying, why do you stay and why,
that's a great idea.
Because then people who've left can say, I left because of this and I'm really happy and this is why. And so it gives them a reason, because they a lot of people like to share their good experiences or their bad, or they can complain about ColdFusion a little more, let them. But I think we'll learn about it. Adrian Marino in the Working Code Discord was talking about how he left ColdFusion several years ago, and he did a lot of migration work to JavaScript and stuff. But he's like, he jumped up. I mean, he basically doubled his salary in a few years going to JavaScript over ColdFusion, because more options, more expertise available, and a lot of things, it's like a lot of people are doing that, but we don't hear from them because they left. So maybe this would be a good way to say, like we're trying to find out for those people.
Sure.
Yeah. Why did you
leave
if you left?
I can certainly try it with the email list we have, see if we can get anyone to answer that. And in addition, maybe on social media or Twitter, it's possible to reach that. And then the other idea that comes to me is find someone, an influencer for another language, and see if they would be prepared to push out that, because obviously their people are following whatever language they're into. Or maybe they're language neutral, like some of the Docker folks, right? They don't care what language you use.
Yeah.
They might be.
I think like Ray Camden still has a reach for a lot of people that follow him for everything, but they used to do ColdFusion. So maybe Ray would help us and just say, hey, we just want to ping a few people and figure out, if you ever use ColdFusion seriously, and you left, you give us some feedback on why you left, where you left to, and what you think of your decision, and why people should
I think
follow.
That's a great idea. Let's see if we make that happen. I think we might get some interesting ideas, might get some discussion going.
Because if someone says, hey, I went to here and there's this is great and this is great and that's great, and we can okay, well, what can we do to make CF better? And that's what we keep asking ourselves, right? How can we keep CF alive? How can we show it? So if there's something that someone else is doing somewhere else, we can try to, incorporate that. I think it's important.
It's a little analogous to a breakup conversation. Some people who break up with their girlfriend or wife or husband or boyfriend will have a conversation to understand how could they improve in the future. Now, the issue there is sometimes it's how can I get you back? And it turns into an icky conversation.
Yeah.
And you've got to be kind of emotionally mature enough to be able to have that conversation and to be open to it. And the same thing with language choices. It's often quite religious or cult-like. on all sides. I mean, I think ColdFusion has a bit of a cult thing going on. I think it's a good cult.
I mean, it's okay to be proud of the language you use and the fact that you're good at it because you've used it for so long. There's a lot of pride in that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm okay talking to people and say, you know what, there are some good things about other languages, and I'd like to know them. Whether I choose to leave or not, I still would like to know them. And the Laravel framework does some cool stuff. And guess what? The really cool stuff we've built into ColdBox. We've built these modules like Quick and QB, which are based on things that someone else has done. We've improved them where we thought they needed improving, but there's no reason we can't incorporate stuff. And everybody copies everybody.
Other languages and ecosystems can learn from what the cool things that have been done in ColdFusion.
And they did. That's the thing.
And
when we first came out,
sometimes there are some things that, some languages are good at certain things, and they're not so good at other things. And it's okay to use one language for one things and another language for something else,
And that's the thing is, I think using the glue and rabbit queues and having other things do things that ColdFusion doesn't do well is a perfect way to do that. You can keep all your business logic in ColdFusion. And like the perfect person to talk about this is Brian Class and what he does for the Johns Hopkins University. ColdFusion is the glue that brings all that together, but they do amazing things with AWS and queues and workflows. But ColdFusion is the core of truth, but it uses all those other tools to do things that ColdFusion is not good at. And his small team does amazing things with ColdFusion because it utilizes tools for the right job. Use the right tool for the right job, but it doesn't need to rewrite ColdFusion to do it. So.
And anyway. I'll give you a kind of strange example of that. SQL databases do database manipulation way better than ColdFusion, Ruby, or any other language will do with flat files. They're just built for that role, and it's kind of pointless. In 99% of the time, it would be stupid to write your own database handling stuff in some other language, because there exists this other, and we don't get upset about that. So why, same thing for these other things.
Exactly. Send it off to a database, like a video processor tool. Send it off to an audio processor tool.
There you go.
So,
if people want to find you online, Gavin, what are the best ways to do that?
Well, on Twitter, I am gpickin, Pickin. I tweet about most things I do. So from there, I'll link to things like Twitter. I'll link to the CFML News podcast. I'll link to the webinars I do for Audis, the online meetups that I might do as well. But yeah, we've got a lot of cool things going on at Audis. We have, I do webinars quite often, but we have a new software craftsmanship book club that we're starting up. We've got a new Audis office hours we're starting. There's a coding with a Kiwi, so you can come watch me and some community members, sort of live hack some code together and talk about it and discuss it with the group. But Audis Solutions is the key place to go for most of that, and Twitter is where I'll advertise it. So go to Twitter, gpickin, and you'll see lots of tweets from me about ColdFusion and everything around it.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show and talking about the ColdFusion user survey.
No problem. Thank you so much. And thanks for doing the survey. It's really great. And I can't wait for the trends episode so we can see what happened over all these years.
Excellent.
Get detailed show notes on today's episode in your free CF Alive Modern ColdFusion Guide at teratech.com. That is teratech.com. Viva la CF Alive Revolution!